If your family ever burned wood to stay warm, and you are buying gas from a company every winter to heat the same rooms your great-grandfather heated for free, sit down, neighbor. I need you to hear what got taken from you. In the winter of 1889, on a farm outside Kuopio in central Finland, a woman named Aino Laukkanen carried one armload of birch splits to the brick tower in the middle of her house. She lit it before dawn. It roared for 1 hour and 40 minutes, and then it went out. She did not feed it again that day. She did not feed it that night. The next afternoon, her children were still shirt-sleeved in the parlor. Her cousin, married off to a mill town outside Boston, was burning through a cord of oak every 10 days in a cast-iron box stove and shivering by the wall. Same winter, same latitude near enough, 1/3 the wood, twice the warmth. Today, most Americans, if the power quit in January, could not heat their own living room for a week on the wood standing in their own back 40. Not because the wood is not there, because we forgot the shape of the thing that burns it right. But here's the twist. What Aino built into the middle of her house was not a stove your grandfather would recognize. It was a battery. And by the time we are done, you will know why the men who sell furnaces spent 40 years pretending it was not there. What Aino knew has a name in 3 languages. Russians call it a ruska pech. Finns call it a contraflow. The Germans built it in tile and called it a kachelofen. In plain English, it is a masonry heater. A heavy brick tower you fire hard for 90 minutes and let radiate for 2 days. That is it. That is the whole skill. One skill, and by the time we close out, you will know how it is built, how it is fired, and the one part they made damn sure never made it into an American building code. The stake is this, friend. A winter where you cut half the wood, feed a fire twice a week instead of 6 times a day, and never once pay a gas company for the warmth of your own kitchen. Sovereign heat. That is the promise. There are 7 pieces to doing this right. 6 of them your grandfather could have puzzled out in an afternoon. The 7th, the piece that does the real work, is the one they buried hardest. We will get there. Your granddad's granddad, if he was Finn or German or Russian, knew this cold. Somebody in the chain just did not get the chance to pass it down to you. That is what I am here for. By the time this is over, you will know every piece. The base, the box, the maze, the shell, the flue, the fire, and the one nobody has ever told you plain. Same order Aino knew. Same order the old masons built. 7 pieces. Most people who try to build one of these botch it because they miss one. And the piece they buried hardest, the piece that turns a brick pile into a 2-day heater, is not a material, and it is not a measurement. It is the 7th. We will get to it. None of this faded because it quit working. It faded because for 40 years, the American metal stove and central furnace industry sold the appliance the inspector could stamp, and the inspector could not stamp what he could not classify.
Before we go on, there's something coming for this country, and the news won't say a word about it till it's already on your doorstep. It comes down to one number, 3 days. That's what the stores hold for you. My grandfather Eli's pantry held a winter, and the difference was never money, it was knowing. I'm Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge, and before Eli died, he made me swear that knowing wouldn't die with me. So I set it down, 904 pages of it in one book, silasmercer.shop, links below. All right, back to it.
The first piece is the ground it stands on, and I do not mean the floor. I mean the earth under the floor. A masonry heater is 2 to 10 tons of brick and stone piled 6 feet high in the middle of your house. Aino stood on a fieldstone pad her father-in-law laid in 1871, packed down into finished clay that had not moved since the ice went. When she leaned her palm on the brick at dusk, the whole thing hummed steady. No shift, no settle. That is what you are building on, not a floor, a footing. Figure roughly 1 to 1.5 tons of masonry per 4 to 600 square feet of well-insulated living space. Height, 6 to 8 feet. Footprint, 3 by 4 for a small heater, 4 by 6 for a heater with a bake oven or a bench. Placement is the center of the ground floor, never on an outside wall. The heat has to reach into every room the mass can see. Chimney exits above the roof ridge for draft. No shortcuts, no sidewall pokes, or the smoke will hunt for the low door on a still January night. Excavate down to firm subsoil if you are on dirt. Lay fieldstone or brick in lime mortar, pad slightly larger than the heater footprint. On a modern slab, add a 4 to 6 inch reinforced concrete pad on top of the slab, or thicken the slab underneath in the pour if you are building new. Level it dead flat with a long level laid 2 ways across the top. Ringing sound when you tap it with a trowel handle means solid. A hollow thud means a void you have to break out and repack. Thin joints on the first courses, 1/8 to 1/4 inch, no more. Fat mortar joints crack out under thermal cycling. Ash pit built into the base, clean-out door at the front. 2 or 3 courses of common brick to form the pit, opening framed for a cast iron door. That door lives at your shin height and gets opened once a week. Now hear the piece nobody tells you. This design did not die out in America because it failed a test. It died out because for most of the 20th century, there was no test. In the late 1980s, a builder named Norbert Sempf up in Quebec sat down with the American Society for Testing and Materials to write the first masonry heater standard this continent had ever had. His words, straight quote, "There was simply no building code coverage at that point." That was 1988, 1989, running into the early 90s before the standard shook out. For a whole generation, if you walked into a county inspector's office with drawings for a 5-ton brick tower, he could not approve it. He could not disapprove it either. He just could not classify it. So he sent you home. That is not a ban, friend. That is worse than a ban. That is a permit blackout. And while it ran, every American who wanted to heat his house with brick got told to buy a UL-listed metal box instead. The USDA Forest Service, in a bulletin called Energy from Wood in the late 70s, already had it plain, quote, "A traditionally effective and efficient example of using wood for home heating." The University of Oregon ran a contraflow efficiency study around 2010 and confirmed the physics. It worked. It always worked. It just could not get a stamp. Modern install cost for one of these built right is $10,000 to $30,000, and I know what that number sounds like. Hang on. The whole point of the next 6 pieces is that it is a build, and a build you can do a course at a time. The objection I hear first is that you cannot sink 30 grand into a stove. Fine. Nobody said do it all at once. What you do this week is figure out whether the middle of your ground floor can carry 7 tons. Call a structural engineer for $200, get the answer, put it in a drawer. That is step 1, and it costs less than a decent metal stove. And here's the tease. The base is easy. The next piece is where every amateur burns his hands. The firebox, the little cave at the heart of this thing, is where 9 out of 10 backyard builds go wrong, because they use the wrong brick. Piece 2 is the firebox, the cave. Ano's was no bigger than a bread box, and when it was going full roar, you could see the back wall glow dull cherry red through the smoke. A masonry heater's firebox is not a hearth. It is a combustion chamber, engineered to hit temperatures a metal stove can never touch, because it is lined with brick that can drink the heat and not fail. 12 to 20 inches wide, 16 to 24 deep, 18 to 28 tall, height a shade taller than width. That geometry pulls the flame up and completes the burn before the gases leave the box. The lining, and this is the piece amateurs miss, is high alumina fire brick, 2.5 inches thick. Not common red brick, fire brick. Common brick spalls and flakes under repeated cycles up past 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, and inside a working masonry heater, you are absolutely running past that. The fire brick lives inside the outer common brick shell like a bowl inside a basket. Mortar in the hot zone is refractory mortar only, not Portland cement. Portland breaks down at sustained high heat, crumbles at the joint. Then your firebox leaks smoke and gas into your flue maze at the wrong points, and the whole draft goes to hell. Joints 1/8 to 1/4 inch, tight and consistent. Door is cast iron, glass optional, with a controllable air intake either through the door itself or a small vault beside the box. Some old Russian stoves used no grate at all, burned right on the fire brick floor to keep the temperature high. If you use a grate, use cast iron and expect to replace it. Batch capacity is 20 to 40 pounds of dry hardwood per firing. That is it. That is your whole day's heat. The high temperature, clean burn is the trick. Near complete combustion of the wood gases, not the slow smolder a metal stove runs. An open fireplace runs about 10% efficient. A simple box stove, 20 to 30. Even an airtight metal stove tops out around 50. A well-designed masonry heater burns clean and stores what it burns. That gap is exactly the 50% of firewood the title promised. First heater I ever tried to help my grandfather patch up in the old timber camp, I mortared a joint in the firebox with straight Portland cement. Old man watched me do it, did not say a word. 3 burns later, the joint cracked out and the box was pissing smoke into the second flue channel. He looked at me, said 3 words, horse sense, eventually. That is the grace beat, friend. I earned it. Now here is the villain up close. Why does not every wood-burning house in America have one of these? Because the metal stove industry, Vermont Castings, Jodel, the whole UL-listed roster, spent 40 years fitting themselves into a code slot that a site-built brick heater could not reach. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. Nobody in a boardroom voted to erase masonry heat. It got forgot because there was no money in you building your own and a great deal of money in you buying theirs. The knowledge died because it could not be sold. Do it today. Source fire brick and refractory mortar from a masonry supply house. $25 to $50 per fire brick locally. A bag of refractory mortar about the same. Put the materials list together this week. Next piece is where the real cleverness lives. The flue maze, and it is the part that turns a hot fire into 2 days of warmth. Pattern break. Everything so far, foundation, firebox, your grandmother could have drawn on a napkin. What is coming next is the piece that separates a masonry heater from a brick campfire, the internal maze. This is the piece the ASTM writers had to argue about hardest in 1990, because it is the piece that actually does the work. Piece 3 is the maze. Now understand, this is not decorative. This is the whole reason a masonry heater exists. Aino's fire burned for 90 minutes. The maze kept the hot gases inside her wall for the rest of the day. Look inside a half-built heater and you will see a warren of vertical channels rising and dropping like the pipes of a small church organ, all of it hidden behind the outer brick. And a quick honesty note here, friend. This is not Bunker and Beans doom talk. I am not selling you fear. Half of what I am about to describe is nothing but geometry your great-grandfather could have laid out with a stub of chalk on a barn door. After the gases leave the firebox, they cannot go straight up the chimney. If they do, all your heat leaves with them. Instead, the gases climb, cross, drop, cross again, and finally exit near the top of the structure. Every foot of that path is heat transferred into brick. Build the channels of fire brick, 4 to 6 inches wide, spaced evenly within the outer shell. Cross-section of each channel, roughly 1/10 to 1/15 of the firebox cross-section. That ratio is not arbitrary. Bigger and the gases slow too much and drop soot. Smaller and the draft chokes and you get smoke in the room. Finished contraflow pattern has gases rise from the firebox into a throat, split into two side channels running down both sides of the heater, then turn and rise again to meet at the top and exit. Russian pattern uses multiple vertical switchbacks, up, over, down, over, up again, inside interior walls. Rounded corners where you can. Sharp corners collect creosote. Clean-out ports with small cast iron doors at every low point where soot might settle. Access them once a season with a wire brush and a shop vac. The University of Oregon contraflow study measured exactly this. The length of gas travel inside the mass correlates directly with heat transfer into the brick and with fuel efficiency. Hot gas contacts cold brick, gives up its heat, contacts more brick, gives up more heat. By the time it reaches the chimney, it is cool enough that the operator has captured almost everything the wood released. Amateurs build the maze too generous, thinking bigger channels mean better draft. Wrong. Big channels mean slow gas and cold soot on the walls. Stick to the 4 to 6 inch rule. Do it today. Sketch your maze on graph paper before you lay a single course. Every channel measured, every cleanout marked. If you cannot draw it, you cannot build it. And now the tease. So far, everything you are building is hidden inside the outer wall. The next piece is what you see, what your visitors touch, the shell. And there is a reason the Central Europeans covered theirs in painted tile. Hang on. Piece 4 is the skin. This is the part of the heater you live with. Eye nose was a white plastered flank you leaned your back against after chores. In a German Kachelofen, it might be a wall of glazed green tile that a family gathered around for 100 winters. Grandfather Eli wrote about a Kachelofen he saw as a young man in 1952. Said one armload of oak carried the parlor 2 days. Journal, page marked, still in the box under the workbench. Outer shell material is common red clay brick as the default. Fieldstone works if the mason is skilled. Soapstone if you have the money. It holds heat longer per pound than clay brick and radiates evenly, which is why the high-end modern builders use it. Joints on the exterior are 1/4 inch, struck smooth. Mortar of your choice for the cool zone. Lime sand, historically, Portland Lime Works today, because this outer skin never sees anything past a couple hundred degrees at the surface. Between the hot flue lining and the outer shell, some designs leave a small air gap. Some pack mineral wool between. This is design specific. If you are working from a proven set of plans, follow the plans. If you are improvising, you should not be. Finish is whitewash plaster for cheap and traditional, painted plaster for durable, glazed tile for the Kachelofen tradition, expensive and gorgeous. Or leave the brick raw and let it patina. Sensory tell of correct operation is this. At peak radiating hours, 6 or 8 hours after the fire went out, you can lay your palm flat on the outer shell and hold it there. Warm as a live animal, never scorching. A premium soapstone metal stove, the kind that hits the wood stove trade magazines, runs $3,000 to $6,000 plus install, and still requires you to feed it wood every 4 hours around the clock in cold weather. Same soapstone, fraction of the mass. The mass is what buys you the 50 hours, not the material, the mass. Here's the fresh angle on the villain. The metal stove men will sell you a soapstone stove and call it mass heating. It is not. A 400-pound stove is a warm rock. A 7,000-pound heater is a battery. And if you bought the metal one already, friend, that is not on you. They are good at selling. It is what they do. Do it today. Pick your surface. Whitewash if you are building on a budget. Save the tile fantasy for later. The next piece is the one that decides whether your beautiful shell just cools a room or actually heats a house. The chimney and the damper. Watch. Piece 5 is the chimney and the damper. This is the part that decides whether your heater breathes right. And honestly, it is the piece the county inspector will care about more than any other. Ino's chimney rose 2 feet above the roof ridge in fieldstone. It never smoked back into the house. Not because she was lucky, because the man who laid it knew what he was doing. Chimney cross-section must match it roughly to the final flue outlet area of your maze. Undersize the chimney and the draft strangles. Oversize it and the flue gases cool too fast on the way up, drop moisture and creosote. Height is above the roof ridge, non-negotiable. A chimney terminating below the ridge line gets downdrafted every time the wind cuts across the roof, and downdraft in a masonry heater means smoke in the kitchen. The main damper is a sliding cast iron plate at the chimney throat, controllable from an accessible handle. Bypass damper is optional, but recommended. It opens a shortcut from firebox straight to chimney for the first 2 or 3 minutes of a cold start, until the flue warms enough to pull the gases through the maze on its own. Operating sequence, written in the order you will do it. Before lighting, main damper wide open, bypass open if you have one, all cleanout doors shut. During the burn, everything stays open. You want full draft. After the wood is down to a glowing coal bed and no smoke rises, close the bypass. Partially close the main damper, not fully, never fully while the coal glows. When the coals are dead cold, you can close the main damper the rest of the way to stop the house heat from crawling up the flue. Modern gas furnace plus ductwork in a new build home is $8,000 to $15,000, plus a gas bill every month for the life of the house. A masonry heater's chimney and damper, done right, is the last piece of a system that never asks for another dollar of purchased fuel if you cut your own wood. Now hear me plain, and this is the limits line. Carbon monoxide is real. A masonry heater with an early closed damper and a bed of live coals will pump carbon monoxide into your house, and it will not smell like anything. Install a carbon monoxide detector on the same floor. Not because I am scared for you, because the old man made me promise I would say it to anyone I taught. That is the honesty piece. Do it today. Budget for a proper masonry chimney. This is not the piece to skimp on. 5 pieces down, 2 left. Everything you have heard so far builds the machine. The next piece is how you actually run it, and after that, the piece I have been holding back all night. The 7th. Watch. Pattern break. You have built it. The tower stands in the middle of your house. 7 tons of brick, glossy shell, cast iron door, chimney above the ridge. And here is the thing the metal stove men made damn sure you would never learn. None of it does a damn bit of good if you do not know how to fire it. That is next. And the 7th piece is coming. Piece 6 is the fire. Not the shape of the fire you grew up with. Not a slow, lazy smolder in a wood stove that you tend all day. This is a fire like a starter's pistol. One loud, roaring event, then done. Wood is dense hardwoods first. Oak, maple, beech, birch. Softwoods burn faster and hotter, but you will need more volume. Moisture content under 20%. Air dried at least 1 full year, split and stacked with the ends open to the wind. A dry split rings like wood on wood when you knock two together. A wet split thuds. Size is 2 to 4 inches thick, 12 to 16 long, size to fit your firebox. Load is 20 to 40 pounds per firing. That is your whole day of heat. Do not add wood mid-burn. This is a batch burn, not a fed fire. Stack kindling on the bottom, a few sheets of newsprint if you like, splits above in a loose crisscross that lets air climb through the pile. Air intake wide open, light from below. Duration is 1 to 2 hours of hard, roaring flame. You want the box glowing dull red at the back wall. You want the chimney showing clear shimmer, not opaque smoke, within 5 minutes of ignition. If you are getting thick gray smoke past that point, your wood is wet or your damper is wrong. End of burn is when the flames die and only coals remain. Restrict the air intake. When the coals darken to red-black, close the bypass, ease the main damper down part way. Then walk away. For a day, sometimes 2. The savings, plain and measurable. A household running a masonry heater burns roughly half the firewood a household running an open fireplace or a simple box stove burns to hold the same comfort through the same winter. Half the cutting, half the splitting, half the stacking, half the hauling. That is the 50% the title promised. Not marketing, physics. Failure mode is adding wood mid-burn to keep it going. Do not. You will overload the mass, waste fuel, and never learn the discipline the design demands. 1 fire, 90 minutes. Walk away. Do it today. This coming weekend, find a supplier of seasoned oak in your county. Not tonight's wood, next year's. Everything in this skill runs on wood you seasoned 12 months ago. Now, 6 pieces down. Everything I have told you so far, the base, the box, the maze, the shell, the chimney, the fire, every piece is a piece the metal stove industry could have made if they had wanted to. They did not want to, and here is why. Because the 7th piece is not a piece you can sell. The 7th piece is coming right now. Now hear this. Back in that Kuopio winter, 1889, when Aino Laukkanen laid her 1 armload of birch in the box before dawn, she was not lighting a fire. She was charging a battery. That is what the Boston cousin never learned. He was running a heat source. She was running a heat store. Same wood, different physics. He fed his stove all day. Hers fed her house all day. And the piece he never knew, the 7th piece, the one no metal stove and no gas furnace can ever offer, is the piece the whole ancient design exists to serve. The 7th piece is the batch burn principle itself. And it is not a material. It is not a measurement. It is a reversal of how you think about fire. A metal wood stove is a heat source. It gives you heat while it burns. Stop feeding it, it goes cold. A masonry heater is a heat store. The fire is not the heat. The fire is a 90-minute event that dumps a whole day of energy into 7 tons of brick. And then the fire dies, and the brick becomes the heat. 12 hours later. 24 hours later. In a well-insulated house, 48 or 50 hours later, that mass is still radiating, still warm, still working. You cannot sell that. You cannot bill for that. You cannot meter it. There is no monthly subscription to a hot brick. That is why the furnace industry and the metal stove trade let it die out of the American house. Not by banning it, but by pouring 40 years of marketing into a way of heating that requires you to buy their fuel forever. Their whole business model needed you to think the fire is the heat. The masons of Finland knew better in 1650. Now you know it too. And this was never about a brick pile in your parlor, friend. This was about being the person whose warmth does not depend on a bill, whose winter does not depend on a company staying in business, whose house holds heat the way a good stone holds sun long after the sun goes down. A masonry heater is a promise to your own household that the cold will not decide when you are comfortable. Somebody else will, and that somebody is you. You do not have to build the whole tower this week. You do not have to build it this year. Do one thing. This Saturday, walk into the middle of the ground floor of your house and stand where the heater would go. Look up. Trace the chimney path in your head. Then call one structural engineer on Monday and ask him if that spot can carry 7 tons. $200 for the answer. Put it in a drawer. That is the whole first step. That is how a masonry heater begins. I ran a small one myself out in the shop one winter. Never regretted an hour of the labor. Tell me down below, did your people have one of these? A cockalofen in a German grandmother's parlor? A Russian stove in a Ukrainian farmhouse? A big brick tower in an old Wisconsin farmhouse nobody could explain? The skill that gets the most stories from you all is the one I go deep on next. A skill that heated the north half of Europe for 300 winters, almost gone from this country. Now you are one of the keepers of it. Next time, the old copper, still, and condenser trick that turned a barrel of scrap orchard fruit into a winter's worth of cider vinegar for pennies, and the year the taxmen made sure you would forget the setup was ever legal. Keep the old ways. They kept